It's been a year since that day. That was the day. The one where I quit my job as a social worker. The call that started that afternoon, I remember it distinctly. It came from a man called Morris Hicks. He was a principal of an elementary school. Mr. Hicks had a stern voice, but I could hear the concern. He was worried. "I've talked to 5 different people, Mr. Wilkes," he said over the phone. He had been extra persistent the last few days, calling child services daily. That one including my boss, who decided to follow up by forwarding the case to me. These kids are not being taken care of. "It's summer vacation, Mr. Morris. So, how do you know that precisely?" I asked. "Mr. Wilkes, these kids have been going to my school for a year. They were always dirty and smelled terrible. I tried reaching out to their father, who is our only contact, but he never answers or returns my calls." "I understand, but that doesn't answer my question. How do you know these kids aren't taken care of when it's summer break?" "I drove by their house, Mr. Wilkes. I saw the boys in the front yard. They had blood on them." "How do you know it was blood and not something else?" "I know bloodstains, Mr. Wilkes," he responded, calmly but with a hint of annoyance. I wrote down some notes and thought maybe I should do at least a drive-by of the house. I hoped that it would put his mind at ease, or at least get him to quit calling. "I will go by today," I replied. It was worth doing just a quick talk with the father. It was possible that Hicks was right, but it would be wrong to assume the children were unsafe just by his statements. I needed to see myself. "Tell me the address and I'll head to check out after lunch." I wish I had never written down that address. The house of the Raymond family was not welcoming. It was a small, run-down house about 20 minutes outside of town. The closest neighbor was a farm. It looked deserted. The Raymond's grass was overgrown, and junk laid all through the front yard. The thing that caught my attention when I got out of the car was the smell. It reeked of a dead animal. I walked slowly to the front door, and the odor became stronger. Mr. Hicks may have been right about the children's safety. The entire house looked like it could collapse as I walked onto the porch. I opened the small screen door to knock. No one answered. I tried again and said, "Child services, please open the door." I heard a giggle. It made me turn my head around as the sound of tiny footsteps were moving quickly. I stepped from the porch and into the yard looking around. I could not see anyone when I felt something tug my hand, startling me. It was a small girl with brown hair and freckles. Mr. Hicks had not mentioned a little girl. She was young though, not quite old enough to be in grade school. It could have been the answer. He may not have known of her. The little girl was curious as she looked up to me and asked, "Who are you?" "My name is Mr. Wilkes," I explained as I bent down to look at the little girl. She had weird stains around her mouth and her clothes were dirty. She had a smell too, like she'd been rolling in something foul. I could see why a school principal would be concerned about safety. "I am here to speak to your daddy. Do you know where he is?" "He's asleep and doesn't like to be woken up. He gets upset when you wake him up." "Where are the others?" "Ben and Tim?" "Yes, where are they at?" "I saw them playing in the backyard," she answered, as the little girl pointed behind the house. She started to run toward the wooden gate that concealed the backyard. "Come on, Mr. Wilkes. I will show you where they are at." "All right. What is your name, sweetie?" I asked. "Everyone just calls me Barb." She reached the wooden gate, and I followed, noticing the smell was getting stronger. It did not seem to bother Barb, though. She opened the gate, disappearing from my sight. "Wait up," I shouted when the gate shut. I placed my hand on the gate and knew something was wrong by the smell. The backyard was even worse than the front. It was covered in even more junk, but that wasn't what disturbed me. It was the small bones that were around. They looked like they came from birds, squirrels, and other critters. Something else stood out too. It was the makeshift table that had bones hanging from it with small strings. It looked like decorations. "What is this?" "It's where they play." "How is this playing?" I inquired of the child as I walked over, studying the table. The boys had made it, from bricks and wood scraps. The top of it had dried blood on it. I was even more disturbed as I turned to Barb to see her acting like nothing was wrong. "What happens here, Barb?" "The boys give it gifts," she responded as she walked over and pulled on one of the bones. I needed to speak to the father. These kids needed to get out of this house immediately. They weren't just filthy, they were playing twisted games. "What do you mean, gifts?" "Their friends ask for gifts made of skin and bones, but it hasn't been happy with them lately. It wants more." "What do you mean it wants more?" "It wants bigger things, and they have been giving it pieces," Barb replied, when I heard something coming from the tree line of the backyard. I saw nothing, but I started to become more nervous as the sound happened again. It was coming from a different direction. "It's never enough, though." I heard it come from behind me, and I felt a sharp pain. I looked to see blood running down the back of my leg, the look of a little brown-haired boy with an evil smile on his face, and then I noticed another younger boy who carried another sharp object. It was the brothers that Mr. Hicks had told me about. I grabbed Barb's hand and began to run to the house. The first boy took another stab at my thigh, and I felt a burning pain. I pulled on the small girl as we ran to the back porch. The two of us ran as each step ached and blood poured down my leg. I quickly pushed open the door and slammed it shut. I locked it as I looked outside to the two little boys holding their blades. They smiled menacingly at me. "Barb, go lock the front door while I call the police," I ordered, as the little girl looked confused. She must not have ever seen what her brothers were capable of. She seemed to be in shock, honestly. "Go lock the front door and hide." "But it'll get mad if it doesn't get a new gift," she protested. "Barb, lock the door and hide. I'll get us out of here, I promise." It took a moment, but she left and I pulled out my phone. I dialed 911 and the dispatcher answered. 911, what is your emergency?" "I am being attacked, I am hurt, and I have a small child with me. Please send help." "Are you safe?" "No, I am not. I was just stabbed in the legs, twice," I yelled. "Sir, you're going to need to calm down. Who attacked you?" "The two little boys that lived here. I'm with Child Services and they sent me here to investigate." "Where are they now?" "I locked them outside, but I don't know how long that will last," I replied as I walked around inside the house. It was dirty and covered in junk. I could see spoiled food everywhere. I started to walk around, looking through the house. I entered the hallway. It looked like where the bedrooms were located. "Sir, you mentioned something about another small child. Who is that one?" "It's their younger sister, but she didn't do anything to me. I brought her into the house with me." Sir, can you secure the child and hide safely until help arrives? The dispatcher asked while I walked down the hallway. I counted 3 doors, but only one was open. The one on the end. Sir, can you do that for me? Yes, I replied while I walked slowly to the last door. I guessed it had been to Barb's room, and that is where she had run to hide. I had to protect her. I will find her, and the 2 of us will hide in the back bedroom. Stay in the line, please. They aren't far away. Okay, I whispered as I approached the room. The smell was awful, and it made me worried that it was not her room, but one of the brothers. It wasn't, though. I did not see what looked to be a child's bedroom. It was worse. It was so bad that it made me drop my phone in horror. It was a man tied down to the bed with chains binding him. He was thin and looked to have not eaten in weeks. The smell was him soiling himself on the bed that he was bound to. He had brown hair like the children, and I assumed it was the father. I noticed something though. It was that he was missing fingers and toes, along with other chunks of skin. The boys had been mutilating him slowly. I walked to the bedside and put my hand on his arm. Mr. Raymond? Who is that? He gasped, squinting his eyes. He was struggling to see me, but he was alive. I looked around to see if I could free him from his restraints, but I couldn't. Who are you? I'm with Child Services, I replied. Get us out of here, he cried out. Something is wrong with my boys, and they need help. I've already called the police. They will be here soon. We just need to hang tight. That is when I heard a sound coming from the house. I walked into the hallway to see the front door. Someone was trying to open it. But I did not hear the police sirens. It had to be the boys. Barb, where are you? I cried out. The door started to shake violently, and I could see Barb finally. She walked to the door, looking at it curiously. She must have thought it was the police and was going to innocently let the boys in here. Barb, don't open the door, I screamed. She turned her head to me quickly as her hand rested on the doorknob. That's when the sound of sirens came. Barb ran away quickly, and I turned back into the room of Mr. Raymond. He could hear them too. I could see a weak smile on his face. I'm going to get the 4 of you out of here and get your boys some help, I said. Just get the boys out of here. They need help because something is wrong with them. What about your daughter? He coughed and looked confused. I don't have a daughter,